This short time that we've worked together, but we've also held common values for the community over the whole time in local government. He will be sorely missed. We were in the process, just so you know, we were in the process of making our office a cultural explosion. We had lots of pandas and artefacts from all the cultures across the city to make it as colourful and lively as possible. And Philip was a lot of fun to share that office with, and I'm going to miss that very much. I think the only thing I can truly say that wasn't said on Saturday is that I'm aware of the big job that is left to do, and I'm going to do my level best to work in a way that he would be proud of going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I haven't known Philip that long, but he was just right from the start when I came into the council. So helpful. I got lost. I couldn't get into the doors. He was always there at the end of the phone helping me. And one of the most wonderful memories I've got with Philip and with Paula being on a balloon ride. And it was just the funnest thing. He was like this little kid in a candy store and just enjoying every second of it and running around taking, I don't know how many thousand photos. And it was just the most joyful thing watching Philip. It wasn't really the balloon ride, it actually was watching Philip. And he made it our day as well and our morning, and it was just so amazing. So I hope he's having just as much fun up there or wherever he is. And I know he was just so joy-filled every day. So I'm grateful that I've met him just even for that short time. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. I, of course, had the enormous privilege of speaking on behalf of you all at the memorial service, and I thank you for that personal privilege. However, it's appropriate that I read a tribute from the Honourable Tim McIndoe, Member of Parliament for Hamilton West, in my capacity as Deputy Mayor and actually as Tim's predecessor. Tim is overseas, as we all know at present, and unfortunately, because of time constraints, neither myself or the Honourable David Bennett was able to read this, so I'm wondering, with your leave, if I may read a tribute on behalf of the Honourable Tim McIndoe. Hearing of Philip's cruel illness a few weeks ago came as one of those awful shocks that we all long remember, and the outpouring of grief in Hamilton and beyond in recent days underlines how keenly we all feel his loss. Philip was a taonga for our city, and his service was unstinting, and I'm sure today's speakers highlight this. To me, Philip exemplified everything I love about Hamilton. He celebrated our cultural diversity with boundless energy. He encouraged and supported every community equally and sincerely. He saw the best in all of us, and he always had time, a kindly word, and that wonderfully warm smile for everyone he met. And who didn't Philip meet? He was ubiquitous. A few weeks ago I texted Philip to tell him that he was constantly in my thoughts and I was praying for him and his family. Despite all the time he spent attending countless local events, there was no question that he adored Alice and Jeannie and was so proud of them both. I know how proud they were of him too. I send my love to them, both as they grieve and we mourn with them. I told Philip that his contribution to our city, especially our myriad of ethnic communities and organisations, had been outstanding, and that he, more than anyone else I could think of, deserved huge credit for nurturing the mature and mostly harmonious race relations we enjoy in Hamilton. I was thrilled when Philip was elected and subsequently re-elected as a Hamilton City Councillor. He was utterly dedicated and he taught me so much about public service and the many cultures who enrich our community. I frequently witness at close range Philip's support and encouragement, making a positive difference for the many, many grateful people. I greatly enjoyed our regular contact over the past decade and valued Philip's friendship highly. In short, Philip was one of the finest, most decent and honourable people I've ever had the privilege to know. I am so sorry I can't be here today, but I am with you in spirit and send everyone who has gathered to celebrate Philip's life and to comfort Alice and Jenny my aroa and condolences. God bless you and rest in peace, dear Philip. You were deeply loved and you were dearly missed. Honourable Tim McIndoe.
I just wanted to speak on behalf of staff. Philip was a member of our community group team, part of our council team. So I've actually worked with Philip as a staff member, as a colleague, as a workmate, and as a boss. Probably the last thing there, and more recently, obviously, as an elected member and the deputy chair of committees that I've worked with. I'd have to say that Philip's one of the most outstanding people that I've actually worked with over the years. He was dearly loved by all people that interacted with him. Staff looked up to him in many, many ways. He was always very supportive. He had a great sense of humour, he had a lot of fun, and as Ziggy said, he was always very, very helpful. And I actually remember when I first started here 7 years ago, even though he was technically one of my staff members, I found that Philip was very helpful to give me insights into the community. He told me the 100 people in Hamilton not to cheese off. That was one of the first things he told me. So being a Jaffa from Auckland, I learnt that pretty quickly, but through some sage advice from Philip. And he also told me the 150 people I should know as well, so and I should establish relationships with. So there was very good sage advice there, but I always found that Philip was a person that you could meet one-on-one and you could have a very free and frank conversation. He was always very objective rather than subjective. He got passionate about things. He didn't get overly emotive, but I found that an endearing quality of his, that you could disagree with Philip on things, but he would respect your opinion as I would always respect his. And he was held in very, very high regard by staff here, and he'll be sorely missed. And I just want to say from all the staff, I just want to pass on our condolences, and that he will be sorely missed by many, many people throughout our large workforce. Thank you.
Alice and Jeannie. We loved Philip in the governance, and Becca would describe him as the darling of the 9th floor. He was certainly Justine's stalwart, and in terms of citizenship, and the person that she relied on heavily for advice and guidance around those ceremonies and also our international delegations. I'm speaking this afternoon because Justine and Becca don't believe they could speak without crying. But in amongst the tears, we have many, many happy and affectionate memories of Philip, and we are very, very grateful to have known him. So our condolences and our sincere best wishes to you both for your future. Without him, it will be hard, but we will continue to honour his legacy here. Thank you.
Any other members of staff or anyone in the public gallery? I'll just say a few words. Philip loved his two ladies, Alice and Jeannie, and he lived for you. Philip was very soft and he was very gentle, but he was also very brave. Philip, in the last traineum, was the only one who stood up for having no fluoride in our water. It's not about the wrongs and rights of that. It's the thing is he was prepared to stand up on his own and be counted for what he believed. And it was one of the things he believed in. I was privileged to, as the mayor, I guess, to work with Philip from the time we first found out he was sick. And I would visit him from time to time, either in hospital or in his home. And I was privileged to be able to visit, talk with him, pray with him. And yeah, that was Philip. I saw Philip the last time about a week before he passed, and he was still in really good spirits. His mind was very sharp and he was all there. So it was just his body that let him down through the sickness, the disease that he had. So Philip lived for others. He would take photos of me from half a kilometre away, and I had no idea he had taken the photos. And then he'd email them to me almost before I got back to my office after the event. And those were really special photos. They were photos that showed the real me. And normally I don't like photos taken of me. Of course, as mayor, I don't have a choice. But before that, in all our family photos, I was always the one taking the photos, and no one in the family realised over the years when they look back, they realised I was never in them because I was always the photo taker, which was my plan, not to be in the photos. But Philip called me out, and I've just got a lovely set of photos that Philip has taken of me. And he did that for other people. He did that. He would do things for people, and he didn't want anything in return for it. He just did it because he was a giver. So today we just honour the memory of Philip, and he won't be forgotten. Thank you. All right. Just one more thing before we open the meeting. Whoops, Paula.
Because Philip told her that I sometimes, it's the age, just excuse me saying this, but Philip told her that sometimes I get hot in council meetings. True story. And so thank you, Alice. Ziggy and I have both got these, and we use them. Yeah.
Okay, so just one more thing before we open the meeting in case anybody didn't know, and if they don't know, they know now. It's happy birthday, Paula. Okay, so we'll now open the council meeting for the 18th of October 2017. It's 1:24. Okay, apologies.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. We have apologies today from Councillor O'Leary, Councillor Pascoe's leave of absence, of course, and also an apology from Councillor Tooman for lateness.
Possibly I have to leave about 5:30 to go to the CBD Association AGM.
Okay.
If we're still going then.
Okay, so I think we'd all like to go to that, so let's keep this meeting tight. And do we have a mover? James, seconded by Mark. All those for, any against? Passed. Okay, would you call a leave of absence? Yep. So confirmation of agenda. Just before I hand it over to the Democracy Manager, I just remind elected members that I intend to use Standing Order 3.6.12 today on limiting speakers 3 for and 3 against. And as per the email that I sent out last night, 2 minutes debate time plus 1 minute for an extension. Thank you, Leanne.
In confirming the agenda day, councillors, please note item 11, special housing area application for Jepson Place residential development attachment 3. The full application for the proposal has been circulated under separate cover, so you have it in a separate bound document there. Item 13, recommendation from the Audit and Risk Committee, adoption of the annual report 2016-2017 will be taken after item 6, which is the Chair's report, to accommodate external presenter. Attachment 1 and Attachment 2 for the annual report were also circulated under separate cover prior to this meeting.
Gary?
I'll just have a move.
Okay, do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Mark. All those for, any against? Carried. Okay, declarations of interest. Yes, Councillor Gary.
On the item 10, the special housing accord issue, one of the applications is from Foster Construction. My father used to own that business 15 odd years ago. There's no tie-up anymore, but I just would rather say it now than someone else pick it up later on. Thank you. I don't believe I have any particular pecuniary interest, but...
Okay, so now move to the public forum. Thank you, Democracy Manager.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. Our first guest presenter in public forum today is Jeff Krieger. Jeff is speaking to item 7, Māori Representation Review. So
it's a total of 3 minutes. A bell will ring at 2 minutes, and then we need to be wrapped up by 3. We'll only be taking questions if there's time inside the 3 minutes. Thank you.
Local Māori have stated they do not want Māori seats on council. However, in collusion with council, they're advocating unelected representation on council. That is morally corrupt and strikes at the heart of democracy. There is no convincing argument for Māori representation. There is real engagement with Māori already. Councillors already represent everyone in Hamilton, so there is no need for Māori delegates. It infers that the current councillors aren't up for the job. People in the city vote for who they want to. That is the way democracy works. The crux of this issue is that local ratepayers have a fundamental right to have a say in the structure of representative decision-making in their community, since they are the ones who fund council, infrastructure and assets. The only democratic proposal is the Māori ward option, but Māori don't want that. All other options circumvent the ratepayer having a say. However, in the current financial situation, can council afford the minimum $153,000 for the cost of a poll for Māori wards? Besides, all options have an ongoing cost to the ratepayer. For example, in Rotorua, the cost for council support for 2 Te Arawa board representatives is $250,000 a year, $250,000, plus funding Te Arawa election every 3 years to the tune of $290,000. Any proposal to appoint positions to committees with suggested voting rights is undemocratic. They would be unelected and therefore unaccountable. Although Māori members would be accountable to their people, they would not be answerable to the ratepayer. Māori representation would make Hamilton City undemocratic. It is no less than race-based privileges and appears to be a solution looking for a problem to solve. Whether you like to admit it or not, councillors voting in favour of appointing unelected Māori representation onto council are putting their personal views ahead of the views of the electorate. What's worse, they're doing so in a way that denies voters their right to accept or reject race-based representation on their council. That is simply unacceptable and undemocratic.
Thank you.
Thank you. Tame Pakaya, can I please ask you and the other representatives from council stakeholder groups to come forward to the presenters? Tame and thank you. The others are speaking on item 7, Māori Representation Review. Now, because a number of groups are represented here. That's 3 minutes per presenter. That's correct.
Okay, so, gentlemen, if I can just have your attention, it's 3 minutes per person. A bell will ring at 2 minutes. A bell will ring again at 3 minutes, and you do need to stop at 3 minutes. So you need to keep it sharp and keep it inside the 3 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, Tame would...
Tēnā koutou I tēnei ahi, te koro matua tēnā koe, te whānau o Philip, ka nui te mihi atu kia koutou. I'd just like to introduce the two members here. We have Glenn Tupuhi, representing Te Runanga o Kirikiriroa. We also have our colleague here next to Glenn, representing Thork, a group known as Thork. Rawiri Bidwas, and of course I'm Tame Pukaya. Apologies from Donna Flavel, who is unable to be here. Donna Flavel from Waikato Tainui, but we had discussions earlier leading up to here. So that is just the panel I'd like to introduce. We're going to lead off with Glenn. Tēnā koutou.
Koro matua tēnā koe, te tepu, tēnā koutou katoa. We just want to start by addressing the matter of wards for Māori. We have discussed this. We have received wonderful support and advice from the officers and have decided that, Your Worship, the democracy can be described as the tyranny of, and has been described as the tyranny of the majority. And we have just looked at the population demographics. We've looked at other factors that pursuing that and the referendum that would go with that would subject our community as a whole and our Māori sector of that community to a degree of stress that we all do not need. We've looked at those of us who have looked at the social media commentaries about the Whakatane District Council approach to this, and you see the degree of negativity. We've just come out of Mental Health Week, and we know from our population, the population of Māori who are suffering from already low esteem, that subjecting our people to that level of stress and the community at wide for the ultimate inevitability of a poll and pursuing that question, we've decided not to present that here today and pursue that here today. We want to talk then about the options that the officers have made in your report, in particular, and go straight to the crux of the matter. Point 2D is about appointments to committees. And we want to support it as far as the value add that having Māori at a committee table. We've just heard Jepson Place as one of your items today. The value add of having Māori selected through a Māori process to be able to make decisions at the table. What would that do for your decision making? The officers will circulate the contribution economically that Māori throughout the city and throughout the wider district make to the GDP of the city and the GDP of the Waikato on a whole. And if you go ahead with the recommendation by the officers, you would be able to peruse those reports. We all like less bureaucracy. Less bureaucracy doesn't mean diminished regulatory responsibility. We've seen national examples where that has gone terribly wrong. Pike River's one, and the Leaky Holmes situation is another. But by having Māori to the table, to be able, with a degree of autonomy, to make decisions at the table or to direct the officers and the rest of the committee in the right direction, imagine the less bureaucracy that will come out of that. Councillor Southgate would be able to comment about, and I don't mean to put her on a position, on the spot here, about the positions, although these are ward positions, of having 2 Māori representatives on the Waikato Regional Council with a degree of autonomy and with a degree of advice as to how to progress any matter in relation to dealing with Māori, and what are the positives of that, and reducing bureaucracy, inquiry, and any lack of response from the recipients of Māori collectives that you would want a response from. We'd like to stress finally, Your Worship and to councillors, the unity. I have the incredible privilege of representing Mātua Waka, even though I'm Tainui. I have the incredible being asked to speak on behalf of the local mana whenua, Mātua Waka, and the iwi at whole. And so those are the 3 points. We are a united iwi. Don't believe what you might read in the media or other sources. We have decided to go and request that you consider looking at Māori representation on the committees, and give the officers the opportunity to really unpack that for you. And we ask you really to consider the value add of having that quality representation, direct feed into your committees by having Māori there as representatives. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Would you like to speak?
Kia ora tātou. Usual one. Kia ora, Mr. Chair, members of the council. Totally in support of what Glenn's saying of our unity. We believe that the wards process is probably not the one to go down at the present time, given the climate, given the potential divisiveness that it might create, and given that Māori have a problem participating in local politics anyhow. So we came together and we seemed to agree that there must be other ways in which Māori can provide, should provide, can provide, and hopefully will provide a greater contribution to the city than what's probably presently happening. Big difference between consultation and decision making. We, people that I represent, the mana whenua of the lands upon which the city is built, are suggesting that they would like to make a greater contribution. Obviously, the Rūnaga will also make a great contribution, likewise for Tainui in their own different ways. And so in order to be able to do that, you need to be at the table. And as Glenn talks about, the value add that might come out of that is probably greater than what's presently happening. Because we see Hamilton City as being a culturally diverse city. We see it as being a good city for everybody. We've been here for the last 150 years. We'll be here for the next 150 years. But we still have the same aspiration. We see Hamilton as being a city for all of us. We would like to make our contribution, and we see the best way of doing that is at the committee level, where we can contribute to the decision making, as opposed to the unforgiving climate of Kia ora tātou.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. We are over time now, so Tame, if you want to wrap up, but keep it very short, please. We are over the 9 minutes.
Kia ora, and I'll just wrap up very briefly. Just going back to the Bell report, it's probably about 3 years old, but the key points that come out for me, of course, and I support my colleagues, we are united. I told them before, all the different factions, when we get together, we are not going down different paths, we are united. So we're united in our presentation today. The report highlighted that we have a total asset base of $6.2 billion in the Waikato region. It includes Hamilton. We play a major role in growing the local economy in Hamilton and in this region. And we're building the capacity of Māori landowners to also increase that too. We want to build that capacity. Māori play a role in the future workforce with the potential of our young, which make up 35% in Hamilton. So we want to grow that potential. And in closing, I just want to say that our contribution to the economic development is important, not only for Māori, but for the overall economic performance of Hamilton, the Waikato region, and New Zealand. And you'll see that with the inland port development. So I just want to thank councillors for listening. Tēnā koutou, te koro matua. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou.
Thank you, gentlemen. I won't be taking any questions. We're just well over time, and to be fair to the first gentleman who presented, I wouldn't have taken questions for them either, so thank you. And that we're over time, so. Okay, so we're now moving to item 5, page 6, confirmation of the council minutes from September, the 21st of September 2017. Do we have a mover? Thank you, James. Seconded. Councillor Mallett is all those for. Any against? Carried. Okay, the chair's report on page 6, item 6, page 19. Do we have a mover? I'll move. Seconded by Councillor Siggy. All those for. Any against? Carried. Okay, now we move to item 13, page 99. So if I can, thank you, Paul and Tracy. So we'll now hand over to Paul and Tracy. We'll take the item as read, and as so.
Tēnā koutou, thanks for the opportunity to be here. We're here to approve the annual report. This is your opportunity to report to your key stakeholders. It's also a statutory obligation that we complete this and audit it by the end of the month. If I could just, before getting to that, if I could just mention the Audit and Risk Committee. We've had a new independent member appointed, as you're aware, by you, Kieran Horn, and the committee has gone from 3 in previous periods to 5 elected members. It's been business as usual really this year. We're going to review the performance of the committee next year, after we've perhaps been together for 12 months. So before moving to the annual report, Your Worship, I wonder if anyone had any questions of me as Chair of an Audit and Risk about the functioning of the Audit and Risk Committee, or any matters you'd like to mention?
No. Can we move straight to the report?
So this is to the report?
No.
Go to the report now. Yep.
You were asking questions about the function of the committee in the first instance.
So moving on to the report, would someone like to move it and I speak then, or would you?
Yeah, I'll move it, and it's seconded by Councillor Mallett.
Great. So the report has been, the annual report has been reviewed by the Audit and Risk Committee, both in an early session with the draft and then the most recent draft, I think on the 13th, and they've recommended that Council adopts the report. This has been a difficult process this year, and we're a little bit behind where we'd like to be in terms of the timetable with this, and in fact you're about to hear that there's a couple of changes to the document that you've seen. There's a couple of reasons for that. We've had an inopportune, in terms of timing, change of staff within the accounts department, which actually had a significant impact on one element of the accounts. We've also had a new auditor on board, and I can relate to this as a very young auditor very many years ago wanting to find issues, but we've had issues right up until last night. So we're going to have some discussions with the auditors about planning and timetables. We hope not to repeat this next year. However, here we are. So if I just hand over, there's a couple of changes, and would you like to speak to those?
Sure. Sorry. So if you're just on the board there, we've just got two changes that came through really late last night. So the first is on page 124 of your report in your agenda. So whereas previously the report that you're looking at will have no events after balance date, Audit New Zealand have advised us that they would like to add in two additional comments in this. So one of them is around the first one, which was resolved at Council on the 21st of September.
Tracy, you said that page 124, is that 24 of our agenda or 24 of the annual report?
124 of the agenda.
So that's note 30, note 31, is it?
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
It's right at the top. So it's got one at a single line at the moment. It just says no events, and so now I've just added in three
gotcha.
sentences.
Thank you.
Yep. You got it? Yeah. Yeah, so note 30. So on at the council meeting on the 21st of September, so we resolved to dissolve Hamilton Properties Limited as a council entity. So that's going through. The second one was selling the shares in Waikato Innovation Park Limited and establishing a new CCO as well. So obviously those have come through late, and they'll be added to the report today that goes through today. So the second, just from a materiality perspective, is on page 108 of the agenda, excuse me, which is our note 19. And again, all we've done here is we've added, it's all called capital commitments. We've just added another $5.7 million to two lines in that. So it was $82 million sitting in your report. It is now $88 million. And that was, again, just due to something that came out late in the piece around some contracts that we got through later on. Yep. So the roads and traffic network have gone up to 54 and water treatment systems have gone up to 18 million. So it's just those two numbers that have changed. One's gone up by 4.5, the other one went up by 1.2.
Their balance sheet, do they? Because they're after.
Yeah, it's just a commitment. It's just a liability that we're, yeah.
Okay, Councillor Mark.
Yeah, look, you've answered the two burning questions that were in my mind earlier, obviously. But there was just one minor semantic one, and that was on actually page 16 regards the Founders Theatre. I noticed that because it's closed, we've said there's no data. Would a better phrasing be zero as opposed to no data? I mean, the fact that we had no people through, and it's neither here nor there to me, but it just didn't seem to make a lot of sense. We had no data implies that a collection of data was a little bit amiss as opposed to the fact that we know there's no one came through. I mean, it's not a die in the ditch thing, but I just thought it made a bit more sense. Stumped you, huh?
On that, so.
Where are we at with printing? I mean, I don't think
I'm
it is
not
either
gonna
way,
waive it.
but is this printing issues and stuff, where are we at there?
It's in design at the moment, but we can change it if we have to. They are waiting for me to come out of the meeting today with any further changes, so I can change it if you would like me to.
I agree with Mark's point, because no data suggests that we have no data. There has been no data. We have got data. It's just the answer is zero.
Yeah.
Because it was, and you could put a note because it was closed because of earthquake things. There has been no activity there, but no data assumes we weren't counting or something like that. Yeah.
Okay. Yep, I can easily change that.
As long as it's not going to,
Yeah, no,
cost
fine.
us a lot of money to do that.
No.
Great. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. That was all for me.
All right, there are no further questions, so all those for? Any against? Carried. Thank you.
You're right.
Thank you, Paul, for coming down for today. Thank you, Tracy, for all the hard work you've done, and I just particularly want to acknowledge our staff on this. They really have been under pressure. Tracy's been putting off having her baby, and Tracy, you got there, so well done. So, so just thank you to all your team, Tracy. You really have put a huge effort in here, and I know it hasn't been easy all the way, so well done. Okay, we now move to item 7, page 21. Okay, so before we start, I have a motion to put on this, which I'll ask Democracy to put on the board. Yeah, it is D. Yep. 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 Okay, so I'll hand over to.
Good afternoon, elected members. There are 3 quick points I'd like to...
Just before we start, could you just quickly introduce yourselves so anyone who's watching understands who's presenting?
That's right. Thank you, Mayor Andrew. Of course, to my left, I have our Council Kaumatua, Tamo Pakaya. To my further left, Michelle Howie, who's the project manager for the representation review. To my right, Muna Wharawhara, who is our Amorangi Māori for Council. Behind me are a number of members of our Council project team that have been working on this report, and also who will be working on the wider representation review. So there are 3 quick points I'd like to make. The decision Council is being asked to make today is whether or not to establish Māori wards, and or whether to further explore alternative models of Māori representation. As you will probably recall, this report has come to this meeting because if Council wishes to establish Māori wards, it must resolve to do so by the 23rd of November 2017. The recommendations in the report contain all options available to Council. There is no staff recommendation as this is a governance matter. And lastly, you have heard our Māori stakeholders state today that they wish Council to resolve recommendation D. Tami, Michelle, Muna and I are happy to take any questions you might have.
Councillor Paula.
I was just going to check that in the that D was the preferred option for the earlier speakers. Yeah, just to make sure. Thanks.
Okay, there's no other speakers going to debate. No other questions. Go to debate. Paula. Sorry, Councillor Paula.
No, that's fine. Thank you for that. Because my name was mentioned in the earlier comments, I thought I would say a few things. I have got a lot of experience in negotiating the governance contribution of Māori, and I can speak highly of the benefits of a range of models. And as people are aware, there were 2 Māori seats provided after 6 years of discussion, mind you, and negotiation with Māori across the whole region. But I can also speak of the benefits, and that has delivered benefits. That has delivered benefits because all of the time the Māori worldview is at the table, at the main decision-making table, and that perspective can be freely offered. We do have obligations under the Tiriti o Waitangi that I think we should not forget about in our role in local government. Those are set down for us and we should be respectful of that. outside of the 2 Māori seats, we also entered into arrangements at a number of levels through the organisation, and this is where I'm really keen to explore what can be achieved. As you're aware, at Regional Council there was co-governance. There were some committees for some purposes that were equal in representation to recommend up to Council. And as a result, we got better discussion with central government and better buy-in of all stakeholders in this issue. Plus, I have to say that my experience is that it brings great financial benefit and contribution. So I do believe there can be value. I think we should be looking at improving, it does happen, so I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but building on and improving our relationships at an officer-to-officer level, so that the work is worked together at a project level, so that significant and key projects can be worked through at a committee level and also at a planning level.
I'll move second for an extension. Councillor Mark.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm nearly finished. I hear regularly offers from Waikato Tainui and other iwi, and we know that in these tough financial times that we're facing and in a scenario of high growth, we actually do need as many partners and contributors. And my experience at the Regional Council is it's always been of benefit. Thank you.
Councillor Gary.
Thank you. It's my view that at all times and in all places, discrimination based on race is racism, pure and simple. Now, that can be material or it can be immaterial. I'll give you an example of immaterial. I would consider the Maori All Blacks to be an immaterial type of racism, but when it comes to the governing systems of our society, it is utterly material. And I say that in the context of a person who was on council 1998 through 2001, in which one of the members of the team we stood on was a Maori. I say that in the context of the 2013 election, where I stood with another person, we bought a team that I bought a Maori, well, sorry, I bought a Maori, that's arrogant. Another member of our team got in, was a Maori politician. So I both find the whole suggestion that we have special electoral procedures for Maori people utterly racist, and I also think that it's actually unnecessary. You can actually get there on your own strength of your own ability, on putting up your platform, and I think it's almost demeaning, I feel, to suggest that Maori have to have special arrangements so that they can get elected. That's wrong. They can get elected on the strength of their own conviction, on the strength of their own platform, and I do not think they need this sort of leg up, which is what we're proposing here. Thank you.
Councillor Dave.
Yeah. We're not actually proposing, or the resolution is not actually proposing the sort of leg up that Gary's talking about, which is representation on full council, though I personally would have supported that had that been proposed, and I still think that that's the best long-term outcome. I recognise that in the climate we've got now and the situation we're in council, that would be a step, it's not a step too far, but a step that would excite unreasonable and unnecessary debate and divisive debate. As one of the earlier speakers mentioned, it would be very divisive in the community, and the arguments about and justification for it would be lost in a lot of unnecessary comments. Gary says that it's possible to be elected on your own merits, and to a certain extent that's possible, but I've actually seen evidence in Hamilton that it's a lot harder to be elected on your own merits if you have, for instance, a Māori name as opposed to an ordinary Pākehā name. I can recall a well-respected person in the community, a university lecturer, who was pretty well known in the community, but insisted on using the Māori version of his name, Matthew, instead of Matthew, which he had previously been known, and I believe that that caused him difficulty in getting elected. Not impossibility, but greater difficulty than it would have. I think that is the reality of the situation, not just in Hamilton. It's certainly not a Hamilton thing. It's a New Zealand-wide thing, I believe. what we're talking about here, I hope, is the interim step is including Māori voices in standing committees of council, such as the ones we have at the moment. I don't personally support a specialist Māori committee, but I do support Māori involved in our existing committees. We have, for instance, accountants.
Seconded, Mark.
Thanks. We have accountants on the Audit and Risk Committee, and I think, even though sometimes I think there's more accountants than anyone else in the world, we actually have, if we can say we need 2 accountants on the Audit and Risk Committee, why can't we say we need a Māori representative, for instance, on the Community Committee or on the Growth and Infrastructure Committee? I think they're probably a lot more important than accountants, I might add. We have commissioners making decisions on our behalf in the resource consent field, people that are not even from Hamilton at times making those decisions. So again, I don't see what the great difficulty is in having a person that's not directly elected, nevertheless being responsible for part of, not all of, a decision. So I think that we're creating bogey men or bogey people, to not use the wrong expression, when we put up arguments like that. Let's look at the reality of the situation. It's not as bad as you think. It's actually a good idea to increase the voice we have around our table.
Okay, we'll go to the votes. All those for? Any against? Could you read it out, please?
The motion is carried. 1 against.
Thank you. Okay, so now go to item 8, page 59. So Councillor Mark has a motion to put up on this paper, so we'll get that up on the board. Oh, sorry, we want ahead, are we? Sorry, wrong one. On Waterworld. Sorry. Item 8, sorry, Waterworld. So Debbie, will hand over to you. We'll take the item as read. And so, Debbie, did you want to say anything?
No, just that we're under some tight timeframes, which is the purpose of wanting to award delegation to the CE. Yep.
Okay, there's no questions, we go to debate. There's no debate, we'll go to the vote. We need a moved by Mark, seconded by James. All those for, any against? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
So item 9, Mark, if we can get Mark's motion up on the board.
I already sent Becca and Leanne a motion.
Yes, you may have, but I was unaware of that. No one's told me, and Mark had told me yesterday that he was putting a motion up. So if the chair isn't informed, I can't make that decision, I'm sorry. I didn't know.
Okay, so I'll put mine up as an amendment, please.
But that's secondary, you guys, okay? That's not the way it works. The chair does need to know if you want to get a motion up first, so that the chair can actually run the meeting in an orderly fashion. So, Mark, you're up first.
And
order your amendment to that.
Thank you. That's fine.
Yep. So, Mark, I'll hand over. Sean, did you want to say anything, or are we taking this as understood and read? Sorry.
I think we can take it as read.
Okay, so Mark, can you talk to yours, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. There we go. I'm proposing that we add 2 words to, or 1 word actually, to the staff recommendation, and that is the addition of the word visit in Romans 1. Originally, I was more in favour of the old one, but the more I read this, the more simple it became to me. It's not a die in the ditch thing, but we did a really good exercise many years ago on the Well Energy Trust where we talked about a livability diamond, and that's actually what the origin of this live, work and play phrase that came out. The only thing missing is the word visit. The reason I figured the word visit in there would add to this was that I didn't think it included enough of the gardens, the zoo, the community facilities that make us a much better place to visit. It's pretty self-explanatory, really. So really all I'm asking for is the staff recommendation plus one word, the word visit. Do I have a second, Bill?
Okay, seconded by Councillor Jeff. So can we have these together so that we can handle them as one item? That's right. Now, can I just clarify that when elected members come to democracy with a motion or an amendment ahead of the meeting, that it's not their job to tell me, because sometimes you may not want the chair to know what's coming. So it's up to the member to come to me directly and tell me, or whoever the chair is. And if that doesn't happen, democracy's job is to hold things in confidence unless they're told otherwise. So I just want to clarify that point.
It's not inappropriate to put a motion or an amendment up at any time, even directly in the debate. So I can do that. No disrespect, I take your point around alerting you to it. Mark and I were having conversation, and others, throughout this morning and lunchtime, so that's why it didn't get to your attention, but I thought we would be able to address it in the discussion here. So there was no intention not for you to know about it, but I am within my rights to put it up at any time.
Yeah, I totally accept that. I'm just explaining that it's not democracy's fault that it played out like this.
No.
They've done the right thing.
No, I just want the opportunity to talk to what I'm doing, so that people understand what the alternative arrangement is.
So, Paula, can you explain
thank you.
yours, please?
So the reason, and I've got a seconder. I noticed Mark hasn't got a seconder yet. Just small technical. Well, it's not on there, but anyway. Thank you. Just in respect that I wanted to be quite specific in the outcomes. I wanted the outcomes to be worded as outcomes rather than objectives. I think some of the staff recommendation, when you've got helps build a strong economy, it's not actually an outcome, a strong outcome. I didn't dislike a lot of the previous outcomes, but I thought they could be honed. And after our workshop, a number of members approached me and had said to me that they quite liked some of the aspects that I'd raised. So I went back to look at those, and that's where that list comes from. I do think if you have things that are too global, you can pretty to put up in there. But this really does focus us on some key points. I think it's easier for people to understand. It makes 9 clear focuses, and obviously I like it because I redrafted it, but if anybody's got any questions about that, I'm happy to take it. But if you look at the original 10 and you look at this, what you'll see is I've just tried to hone them in a bit, be a little bit more positive and a bit more specific.
Okay, so questions, Councillor Mallett?
Sorry, my question was I was confused when you talked about 2 things. I didn't realise that there was a absolutely standalone amendment. I thought that the 2 things you were talking about were Mark's visit and the existing. I thought that they were the 2 alternatives you're talking about. I haven't even really assimilated what's up there at the moment. Sorry, so I withdraw.
Okay. So there's no more questions. Yes, General Manager Sean.
I just wanted to make a comment on just in terms of the process. So the existing 10 priorities in the Hamilton Plan are the existing community outcomes. So just in terms of how the amendment and the motion are sort of voted on, if both are rejected, then that means that the existing Hamilton Plan 10 priorities remain the community outcomes. I just wanted to make that clear in terms of how kind of the process worked.
Okay, so we move to debate. Councillor Mallett. Yes.
Sorry, beg your pardon.
Sorry.
I now have
so we'll wind back to questions again if we
Yes,
finish.
please. Think I've now sort of assimilated some of this. Can I ask Paula, is it right to ask her across the table? There's positive connections to the river, world-class public gardens, exciting arts and culture, fantastic parks and green spaces, recreation, blah, blah, blah. There's nothing about housing in there, and you're only referring to the CBD, central commercial stuff. Was that deliberate or just an oversight that
it was
that the fundamental parts of an economy are completely empty, are missing?
No, that wasn't deliberate. I mean, I've got a strong growing economy, which wrapped up that. Originally, it said the third city economy, and I thought, well, I'm not into competing with other centres. We just want to be the very best economy that we can be. That actually isn't, the word housing isn't in the newly derived one either. The high quality infrastructure, that's around building communities. I'm not trying to exclude housing at all. I think it's encapsulated into the strong growing economy, the quality infrastructure and those kind of things. Because remember, we're the providers of the infrastructure and facilities, we're not necessarily the providers of the actual houses.
I guess my point is that you've taken the effort to identify specifically a number of
those are
tertiary type activities, whereas the fundamental activities don't, to me, I can't see them getting the emphasis they require.
These are based on the last 10-year plan, community outcomes. If you look, you'll see that.
Yeah, well, I didn't agree with that one either, so I guess you're going to have to debate that as well.
Right.
Yep. So I'm just very concerned, and sorry, this may not be. I'm just very concerned that it's vacant with regard to some of these, or silent with some of the core infrastructure stuff, core requirements.
Okay. Councillor Gary will hold that debate, please.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Dave.
I think I've got a question on the motion, which is not showing.
So the motion,
I can't see it.
The motion is exactly the same as the staff recommendation, with one other word in, just so.
Yeah, where is that word?
As a visit.
Yeah, where is that? I'm trying to look on the original. It's not. Yeah. Yep. Thank you. I just want to see that.
So if we can go back to Paula's and have Paula's displaying, and on the other one we'll work off the staff recommendation with the one extra word in, so that we're not going back and forwards. Okay, so we're finished with questions. Councillor Mark, were you questioning or debate? Okay, so the motion, Councillor Mark.
Look, I'd just like to point out here, this isn't a great dividing of ways between myself and Councillor Southgate, whom I respect greatly. In fact, you've got the two champions of the community and services in here with a competition of ideas, so that's a very healthy thing. So I just want to put that out there to start with. I do pick up on Councillor Southgate's point that if we are too global in our vision, we do miss out stuff. But to that end, also, if we're too specific, we can leave stuff out as well. If we're too specific, we get too prescriptive. And that was originally my thinking around moving away from the long list there to a more broad spectrum 3 that the staff recommended. The reason I've added to visit in there, so it's really in Romans 1, is that our city embraces its natural environment, has green spaces, features and community facilities that make a great place to live, work and play. I think live covers housing, covers infrastructure, and covers our existing community, which I would certainly hate to be neglecting at in the place of growth. Work, very, very similar. Play, obviously very important. But visitability is something we can't miss as a city. We need to be attractive. I obviously believe that Hamilton is the best city in the world and would encourage everybody to come here and visit the place. We've just seen statistics showing that we're out punching Rotorua now when it comes to visitability. This speaks to our conference facilities, to our zoo, to our gardens, and to everything that's going to attract people to come and take a look. And it also speaks to our reputation, which I believe is very strong. I think this is actually, I know a lot of people are saying this is not really an important document. To me it is. It's actually our vision as a city. And those 3 are very, very simple recommendations that I could easily and happily work with.
Councillor Jeff.
Thanks, Mayor Andrew. I was originally a supporter of the 10 or 9 up there. I can see that of having 10 up there because I'm a great believer in being specific where you possibly can, and I've never liked vague mission statements really. The problem for me is as I've looked at it in the last couple of weeks and gone through the 10 and discussed it with a few people, we've never been able to agree. There's always 1 or 2 that we just can't agree on, and so I've kind of reached the stage where I've tired of it a bit, to be honest. And I would just rather see us go with the broader statement and push on with other things. At the end of the day, it's a bunch of pretty words, and let's just vote on this, move on, and get on with some actions. Thanks.
Councillor Paula.
Okay, obviously I'm going to vote against the motion, out of no disrespect to my colleague Mark, because we had lots of conversations and actually we're in agreement about some of the key factors that are encapsulated in both. I guess what I don't like about the main motion is the bylines. The Great River City is fine, but then in the sentence below it, it doesn't refer to the city, the river. A city that embraces growth is unbalanced because it doesn't talk about the existing city that we already have as alongside of growth, because we all know growth is important, but we all know we've got a current city to serve as well. And a council that's best in business, I do believe we should be giving top customer focus and best value to our people, but we're not a business, we're a business-like organisation in my view. So I didn't like the bylines, and I didn't think that all of the wording was outcome-based, it was more broader objectives. I tried to be quite specific about measurable outcomes. I take Gary's point on board actually around there could have been a slight stronger comment about growth, but it has got stronger growing economy. I agree entirely with Councillor Bunting that it's about livability alongside growing the economy. It's about growth alongside of caring for the current city. But what I like about those 9 is I can clearly see some focuses. And remember, we can't do everything in this upcoming plan, long-term plan at all. We can't do everything. We've got to really hone down on what is possible. And I think that gives a better steer about where we're going to put our focus around the gardens, around the river, around arts, culture, growing the economy. And I did change the last one about the capital of high performance sport, because there again, I don't think we have to be the best at the best of everything. We just need to provide good. Thank you. We just need to provide strong facilities and services for our people. We don't need to be the best of the best, but we need to be very good. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Martin.
Thank you. Marginally, on balance, I think I go for the staff recommendation, but if this becomes the motion, then I'll vote for this. I think the staff recommendation probably gives us the big holistic higher picture, and that's an on balance. And as you know, I've clutched the previous Hamilton plan to my chest and going to be worried when we do away with that Hamilton plan, what we're going to do with those print copies, particularly up in the Mayor's foyer there, because the new Mayor shows the Hamilton plan with great pride to many people. But anyway, we will obviously do the trimmed down version. And when I say I think it's a higher level, a great river city, I like that. And I talk about the green spaces, features, community facilities make it a great place to live, work and play. I interpret that as embracing the social and cultural well-beings. I interpret that as embracing social justice, embracing culture, arts, performance. To me, I think before we go off to creating the great top sporting performance facilities, we just want our kids to be healthy. We want our kids to have many opportunities, and if through those opportunities one of them becomes a top performer, that's fantastic. But the other 99% need to lead a good life, and in that regard, I think the heroes are the people who run the netball and the volleyball tournaments for our young people who are not going to go professional in that sport. So that's my take. I also want to make a prediction that when we start the massive community consultation and debate on the 10-year plan, which will have huge financial challenges for us as a growing city, I'm going to predict that not many submissions will be addressing these high-level statements. I think they'll probably be into far more micro detail than this. But anyway, if that passes, I'll support it as a substantive motion, but I probably think on balance the original motion touches a higher level.
Councillor Dave.
Thanks. I'm with the Deputy Mayor, and I love a good coffee table book, and there's certainly examples of that here in this motion. I feel all warm and fuzzy when I actually read both of these. But I'm probably in Councillor Taylor's camp when I come back to reality, when I wake up from the dream and think, well, what are we actually going to do in any of these areas? And neither of these amounts to a hill of beans when you get down to discussing the resolution. And I think it's doubly ironic when we looked at the last item that we discussed immediately before this, how much time do we spend debating that $10 million that we were going to spend on the pool versus a coffee table book here? Stuff all, in reality. And I know we had the opportunity to, but you know, that sort of thing is more important to me, and I think more important to most residents in the city than this sort of thing, though it probably helps the producers of coffee table books to have more of these. Thank you. Oh, sorry, I am on margin, I meant to say this, in favour of the motion because it's got slightly fewer lines in it.
Councillor Siggy.
Well, I have to a little bit agree with Councillor McPherson. We talk about this for far too long, really. And but I do support Councillor Paula because it is more specific. Because I only just saw it and supported it. I would love to have some more greeny stuff in there, some more eco-friendly stuff. But we can work that in the details. But it is better to have. For me, the other one is too wishy-washy. Yeah, I like to have more detail, so I totally support the amendment.
Councillor Gary.
Thank you. Of the two, I approve the staff recommendation, which I think now is Mark's recommendation. Primarily because it does, at least in the Romans 2, embraces growth. Our city has infrastructure that meets our current demands, which is, I think, addresses one of Paula's concerns, supports growth and builds a strong economy. My concern with the amendment is, as I said before, I'm concerned that we pick out, and I think each of those things is somewhere along the line being called a jewel in the crown. And one of our 6 or 7 jewels in the crown, we identify those things without being a little more generic with them. And I know I've been critical of people who are generic with things, but when you're doing a vision statement, which is what we're doing, which we're required to do by law, so we do have to do it whether it's a coffee book or not, that you need to be a little bit expansive. And I approve this, and I think Mark's recommendation does that better than the Paula's one, which just sort of tries to pick winners, and it's far too weighted towards the tertiary level services we provide rather than the core level services we provide.
Councillor Leo.
Yeah, I think looking at Paula's motion, it's not really a hang of a lot different to the 10 priorities which we had last time. It's just that the words have sort of been rehashed. Personally, I like something which is specific, and in the 10 priorities which we did have, of course, they were very specific. I'm a little bit concerned that there's nothing in there about the access to affordable housing. As Dave says, hey, let's just get on with it. And I think the easiest way around it is to actually make it a bit more concise, and as a result of that, I'll be supporting the staff recommendation.
So just before we go back to Mark, this paper came to this council through a briefing. It's didn't get to the motion. It's then a motion went up to, a procedural motion went up to get this removed from the, to stop it during the meeting. It then went back to another briefing. From that briefing, it's come back here again. As you know, I'm not into glossy books being made and distributed on ideas that will never eventuate. If we've got a dream, let's get on with it. Less hooey, more doey. Let's talk, more action, and let's get on with building a great city. Mark.
Thank you. Mark. Yeah, just very briefly in reply, thanks to everyone for your contribution. Just picking up on Councillor Henry's comment about she would prefer it to be greener. Actually, I'll look forward to her support, actually, because I think my one is actually greener than the other one, so there's no harm in changing your vote. I would just want to stress, though, that let's not underestimate the importance of this document, because to my mind, and one of the reasons I stood for council was so that I could share a vision. And this, to me, is the closest thing we've got to a vision. I firmly believe that people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. people vote us in for that very reason, the kind of things we believe, the kind of things we do. This is the closest we've got. And look, I'm totally respectful of Councillor Southgate's amendment, because she and I think very, very similarly on many, many things. And we had a really good discussion over lunchtime, and if I'd had more time, I would have tweaked this around a wee bit more. But this is a clear, a simple vision. It's not designed to be put on a coffee table. It's not designed to be rolled up and smack people around the head with it. It's designed to inspire us, and it's designed to give us a clear direction, a clear, at least the closest thing we've got to a vision, if you like. So, look, I think it's great. I think we're going to pull it over the line, and I'll stop now because we've all got stuff to do.
Okay, we'll go to the board on this one.
Sorry, to be clear, we're voting for...
So the first is we're voting for the amendment. Sorry. No. Yep.
The amendment is lost. 2 for, 8 against.
Now we're voting on... So now voting on the motion.
The motion is carried. 9 for, 1 against.
Okay, so we're now, excuse me, no comment. We now move to item 10, which is page 65. Thank you, Luke.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. I'm happy to take the report as read and just give elected members a very short overview. St Luke, yes. Thank you. Of the brewery, yeah. So look, in accordance with the SHA policy that this council endorsed earlier in the year, we commenced our first tranche of expressions of interest, calling for parties that are seeking SHA declarations to submit expressions of interest. That period closed, and this is just our first initial report to you that gives you a heads up of the location of those applications. And the recommendation is to, in relation to this first report, is obviously to note it and to enable staff to continue engaging with those landowners on their expressions of interest, because for all of those included in this report, more information is needed before we can do a full and complete assessment to give you another set of recommendations to either proceed or not. I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, questions only at this stage. Councillor Mallett.
Thank you. Under the SHA process, I think that's the right angle to be asking this question from. What protection is there for the property rights of existing land users, landowners, facilities next door to an SHA? There's a process we go through now, isn't there?
That's correct.
After this, yeah.
So, and thank you for pointing that out. That's a very good point, Councillor Mallett. What I've recommended here is that of all the applications that we've received in this report, not the Jepson Place report, it's a separate matter, that they're all publicly consulted on, so that there's a period of 3 weeks community engagement where we enable people, directly affected parties or any other interested people, to provide feedback to council about the SHA and any impacts that they may feel arise as a result of that project.
And everyone has, and I might use the word wrong here, everyone has standing? Who doesn't have standing? You know what I mean by that?
We're able to receive any feedback at all.
So people who have existing property rights there, and as an example, we've had discussions with Fonterra, the process for them, or any other person who opposed or is concerned that a development close to them might affect what they are currently doing, do we go through almost like a resource consent process here, or a special housing accord process, whereby an affected neighbour would say, I hope these people know that we operate 24 hours a day, and there's lots of traffic coming around here, and we have lights on for 24 hours a day, and every now and then there's a little bit of smell might come from our place. Please be aware that when you're buying a house here, you accept all those things? Is that this what?
So I think you're talking about two different aspects of reverse sensitivity. So I'll just be clear about the process. So we would put all of the applications on our website and seek feedback from any interested party. We'll take that information and use that to inform our evaluation of each of the expressions of interest before we report back to you. That's one way in which people who live very close to these locations can provide feedback. Once we've done our full assessment and we come back with a recommendation to either declare an SHA or not, if the recommendation is to declare an SHA, you guys will endorse that, it'll be sent to the Minister will declare it, and then they can provide submit resource consent applications, what I call qualifying development applications.
Okay.
In that process, there's an ability for further participation, so further limited notification, similar to what you would have under a normal RMA process, where those types of matters would be taken into account as part of the approval process itself. When you then, the second part of your question is about what happens to people when they, say for example, move into a site that's next to an industrial area, right? So
because just put it in context, at the moment the whole thing's an industrial area.
That's correct.
So you got an existing user there who said, okay, this is great, but this is where we'll put our factory because it's always,
Questions, Gary, please.
So
Specific
if you were the
questions.
guys who 50 years ago built a big factory there and assumed that forever or for a long, long time you'd be able to do all these things, and you spent hundreds of millions of dollars investing in this development, and then all of a sudden, okay, so just keep on going about what protections they would have.
So first protection, first layer is that we'll receive their feedback. We will take that into account with all the other things that we need to do as part of our evaluation. When we do our evaluation, we'll report it to you. If you guys, it's your decision whether or not to proceed or not. If you make a recommendation to proceed, all it does is it declares it as a special housing area. They then have to come back for subsequent resource consents. Those resource consents can be also notified at a limited basis. We'll receive that feedback. That gives us an ability to condition any subsequent approvals associated with it. But the important thing to note is for any SHAs, there's no appeal rights to the court. So once the site's been declared for an SHA and someone submits a qualifying development consent, we can condition it, but if another party doesn't like it, there is no appeal rights. Okay? So that's why getting it right in terms of declaring the SHA is very, very important, and why public engagement, which I've recommended in my report, is essential for all of the sites that are being reported on in this report.
This is a new technology or new legislation. So have we, this is a hard question for you, have there been similar situations around, and the specific one I'm talking about is Fonterra, but it's a generic type question. Have there been situations where people have had to not operate their factories as often as they used to, or?
I'm not aware of that. Yeah. Certainly in Tauranga, there's examples of where SHAs have been declared on industrial land, but for us, the SHA for the Te Rapa North application is next to a very, very significant, nationally significant facility. So we're doing some more research around that to see if there's a comparable case. We haven't found one yet at this point. But I suppose the important thing here is that we haven't made an evaluation on the Perry's project. So that project is, we've received an application, we've got most of the information, there's some things that they haven't provided us with. And what we're saying is, look, we're not asking you to make a decision today, we're asking you to let staff get on with the process of continuing to work with them so we can do a full evaluation.
So it'll come back to us again, will it?
Yes, it will come back to you again.
And there'll be a recommendation from you?
It'll be a recommendation from
Either
staff.
yay or nay, or...
Exactly, yeah.
And that recommendation, will that come back with, and we recommend this subject to these medications? Or could it, conceptually, could it come back and saying, and it could come back and say, yep, I think we should go ahead with this, it's going to be great for the city, going to be great for housing, going to be great for tourism, and I think that Perry's can mitigate some of these things by doing these things, and these have been discussed with Fonterra. They're comfortable with it as well. And I know I'm asking you to...
Yeah, the degree to which we can accommodate those types of reverse sensitivity matters in a declaration is fairly limited, and the reason why is the criteria by which you can actually recommend an SHA under the legislation is fairly narrow, and the decision-making criteria for the minister is fairly narrow. Those finer grained details are likely to be dealt with through a subsequent consenting stage. Nevertheless, though, the compatibility of the land uses is something that we are taking into account as part of that, and indeed all of the SHA applications we've received.
So, specifically, what input would any neighbour have, and what rights would any neighbour have to demand mitigations or seek for mitigations?
Well, first of all, their first rights will be through consultation, as if you endorse my recommendation today. So we'll put it up on the website, and we'll seek and explicitly elicit those views. We will look at those and analyse those, and the degree to which they inform our evaluation is yet to be determined, but they may be material things that we need to take into account. We will then make a recommendation to you once we've received all of the relevant information that we need. At this point in time, there are still some, for all of these ones, bar the Jepson Place one, we still need some more information to proceed with the full assessments. And at that point, that'll be a decision for this. Only this council can make a recommendation to send it to the minister or not.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Paula.
Yeah, so I lost the thread of that because it kind of went around. But what I was interested in was the why the assessment against the policy and the public feedback occur simultaneously. Did you say? I heard you say that the public feedback would help you evaluate, but the criteria are the predominant thing against which you evaluate. Isn't that right?
That's correct, but the policy also enables that assessment to be informed by feedback that's received in relation to those applications. So there are some things we can continue assessing. So, for example, infrastructure-related matters, right? They are largely confined, discrete technical matters that can occur and progress outside of receiving any particular public feedback.
Yeah, I suppose that it does become complicated, doesn't it? Just as to what weight you give to whom from the public, because you're likely to get supporters of any given development, plus people who have a contrary view or an outside view, including, like some people who want a greater proportion of social housing or whatever else. So you're going to get, and then you're going to have to apply a process to weighting that. So how does that fit in with measuring against? I was just surprised because I thought you would do the assessment against the criteria and sort of in a neutral way, and then say, well, this is how it fits within our intention of the policy. And now we want to see what people think about that. But you're doing it together, so I was just a bit surprised.
Well, they're not mutually exclusive. So
I know they're not.
So the first thing that we'll do is we'll seek feedback, and the degree to which that feedback is material will be dependent on the content that's contained in that feedback. So for example, if someone comes in and says that they don't like it and there's nothing supporting that, it's very difficult for us to give any kind of consideration of that kind of feedback. If someone presents a piece of evidence, technical evidence, or any other piece of evidence that helps us make a determination in accordance with the policy, then that's something that we should have a think about. But you're right in that the primary parameters by which we'll assess this is the policy and parts of the Act itself.
Yeah, so what people submit, you'll be picking out the relevance as far as it lends support to the policy or challenges the policy.
The degree to which the submission relates to the policy or presents some sort of evidence or information that we don't have or was not present in the application are the types of things that would be of relevance for us.
Okay, so it's not just sort of philosophical point of view on it.
No, it's not. No, we've got a fairly defined legal obligation by which we need to assess our EOIs against the policy.
Cool. So the things that Councillor Mallett talked about, like reverse sensitivity, amenity, neighbouring issues, traffic, those sort of things. If people submitted on that, then you'd be interested in that because it would be relevant information.
That's correct. Those. I mean, once again, generic statements addressing those types of things are unhelpful. They need to be as you can
Borne up.
appreciate,
So
relatively specific and
evidence-based.
evidence-based, yes.
Okay, so you're looking for an evidence-based feedback from the public along with sort of local knowledge.
Yeah, that's right, and
informed.
that's the whole purpose of engagement. I mean, one, in the sense that we don't have perfect knowledge and we don't hold all knowledge in relation to these matters, and I'm firmly on the view that there's real benefits in engagement.
So you'll be, are you just going to put it out, or you're going to target stakeholders? I mean, like, for example, the regional council might have a view, given that they're involved in Future-Proof itself might have a view. Neighbouring districts might have a view, depending how close it is to the boundary, etc.
Yeah. Look, it will be in accordance with the provisions that are actually contained in the policy itself, and it's included as an attachment, and it's outlined in. Just bear with me.
It's a while since.
It's contained in paragraph 18, which is included as attachment 2 to. Attachment 1 to item 11 of your report, of the next report, where there's a copy of the policy there.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Dove.
I've got my iPad up this way because that's the only way I can see the table in here, for the way it gets done, which is a problem we've had for a while. But I'm having a little bit of difficulty getting my head round these 6 applications in comparison with the next report, the other one, and I can't quite tell from either report why the other one's accepted to go bang to the next stage and these ones aren't. What extra has been supplied with that? How come that one's ready to go to the Minister, these aren't?
Look, I'm happy to address that. It's jumping to the next report. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
I didn't want the whole picture of the next one, but if that had been part of the same table, I could have maybe judged them against each other.
That's a good point, but my rationale for the early recommendation for Gibson Place is contained in the next report in paragraphs 39
I'm
and
okay
40.
for you to bring them both in together.
Sure,
for
okay.
comparison.
So for elected members, if you read the next report, which is specifically about Gibson Place, there is a detailed evaluation for that specific expression of interest, but the rationale for the early recommendation is contained in paragraphs 40 and the bullet points following on that. So, so first of all, the level of detail that was submitted by the applicant in relation to Gibson Place was very, very, very detailed compared to the level of detail that was submitted for the other ones. That site only approximately 6 months or so ago had received a resource consent approval from this council for 71 dwellings on a non-notified basis. The SHA seeks to increase that by 9 dwellings, or no more than 9, to 80. And a high degree of confidence that even though that was an increase in dwellings in terms of the material impact of that in accordance with our policy, that it could be accommodated.
Why did that need to be a SHA? Couldn't it have been just a minor variation to the resource consent?
It wouldn't. Look, it's a decision the applicant's made.
Yeah.
And also that land area is explicitly referred to in the policy. So if you look at the policy as well, which is included as an attachment there.
It seemed to me that the primary reason, really, though, would have been that was already zoned residential and the others weren't.
Well, it is
because that's what I'm wondering. Under the SHA Act, it removes any. I thought the intent was to remove any consideration of the underlying zoning.
It doesn't stop applicants for seeking SHAs on residential sites.
It makes it irrelevant, whether it's residential or industrial, irrelevant, doesn't it?
It's less important than for when you're looking at something on a non-residential site, certainly. But if you look in the policy itself, in attachment 1 to that second report on Gibson Place, which is on page 93, so in terms of locational considerations. So proposals for SHAs at paragraph 15C, at the bottom of paragraph C, is proposals for SHAs will be considered in all areas except the special character zone, but it makes an exception for the Gibson Place site on the basis that it was a Housing New Zealand site that had already been consented. Now the consent was in a special character area, but right on the edge of it, and in an area that was completely different from the rest of Hamilton East. So for this particular landowner, that consent, and this is my opinion only, I wasn't the officer who assessed the resource consent, was in a separate unit, but it pushed our controls to the very limit. And I think going from 71 to 90 to get a higher yield to deliver on the social housing component.
71 to 80.
71 to 80, sorry. Yeah. 71 to 80 was not a variation to the consent. It was looking like it may have been a new consent that they would need to submit. The SHA gives them an alternative pathway to achieve that social housing outcome at that site. So that's to me, that's a very, very good outcome here on a site that's going to be set aside for a mix of housing types, both for Housing New Zealand and for Waikato Tainui.
So that's not going to get consulted on further with the public, that one?
No, I've
without going into too much detail?
No, I've recommended
these
that it
ones
hasn't.
are?
Yes, that's correct. So my recommendation for Gibson, on the basis that it represents yes, it's a departure, but it's recently been consented, it's gone through that process and was non-notified for 71 dwellings, to use the tools that we've got and to get an affordable housing, mixed housing outcome on a site that needs it, that's already been explicitly addressed in the policy. We think it's a very, very good outcome.
Because it could be a bit unfortunate if the impression was given to potential SHA applicants that if you've got a residential zone that you're trying to put something a little bit different on there, then it's easier and quicker to get an SHA than on an industrial or commercial one, which was not the intent.
No, it's not the intent, and I would say there's a very unique set of circumstances in relation to this particular application. It's not one that I'd be recommending to you on other sites.
If let's say, hypothetically, that we'd had no resource consent application already in place for Gibson Place, it probably would have ended up on the list here with the other 6.
Yeah, it's just that we've got a recently approved application that was non-notified. This is, our assessment is yes, it's an increase, but it's relatively minor. High degree of confidence around the impacts in that. We've had confirmation only yesterday that in terms of water and wastewater, no problem. Right, that additional 9 can be accommodated within the network. We're just waiting to hear on just to confirm the transport, which we're fairly confident of.
Have you done it? Yeah, interesting. I'll ask you some more questions on that in light of our discussion this morning. So that's that one. What about the next one? But anyway.
I can't answer that one, I'm afraid.
It's a never-ending question.
Councillor Mark.
Just one very, very simple question. With the exception of the Gallagher's Habitat for Humanity one out of these 6, to your mind, are these realistically going to address affordability, or are they all going to be kind of expensive? Because that's the intention, right? Yeah, look, the degree to which they'll impact affordability is solely through the mechanism of increasing supply. Right. Other than the Gibson Place one, where they've made an explicit commitment around dedicating a portion of that housing to lower incomes. Gibson and Gallagher's, yeah. And the Habitat for Humanity one, which I think is a really, it's great to see it's really exciting. A philanthropic organisation involved in that. So that's the policy delivering some of those social housing outcomes we were seeking. It's difficult to say with any confidence at all, the degree to which any other houses at those locations will be affordable. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Councillor Gary.
Thanks, and this is just a quick one. The Te Awa Lakes is broken into A and B. On page 74, which I think is the table Dave had to turn upside down to watch, it talks about, one of the columns is infrastructure. So that's the third one from the right, anyone trying to find the column. And it says there that claim this development utilises existing infrastructure. That's a claim that has been untested as yet. Is that what it says?
So and that's for Area A. So if you go, which
is a much smaller part.
Yeah. So if you look at on page 76, you'll see the areas A and what they refer to as Area B. Yeah. So they've split the applications. So Area A is an area that already has resource consent and some development in place. So it's zoned at Te Rapa North Industrial. So there's a service centre there. There's a couple of other
This is where the BP...
that's correct. Yeah, there's BP Service Centre and a couple of
Cafe
other
and a few other things there.
etc. And when that resource consent application came through to council, there was a private development agreement accompanying that, and there's infrastructure that's been put in place that was sized to accommodate the development that was consented for that area.
Which included 100 dwellings, is that right?
No, the infrastructure that was provided was to service the industrial commercial component. The Area A SHA application includes information to suggest that the infrastructure that is in place that may be suitable, subject to some other upsizing to service the site. So we need to test that and
yeah, I was going to
validate
presume that. So there's some work to be done to test that.
There's some work to be done.
And presumably any work that was required would be funded by the developer.
That's correct. In the policy, that's very, very, very strong direction in the policy around for unfunded areas that there's a private development agreement needs to be secured.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'll move. Do we have a seconder? Councillor James. Okay, debate. I'll start as a mover. So this is the special housing area, which is going to bring several. I'm delighted with where we're heading here. We've got several thousand houses here proposed, and there will be more to follow. And this will fill a hole in the market for the next 1 to 5 years, while we're waiting to break open our next growth cell, which we haven't finally decided which one that's going to be yet. But this is just opening up the market for that 1 to 5 years till the next growth cell comes on, which will take us through for 5 to 20 years. So it's some of these houses are affordable. A lot of them, the concept behind the Act is to to increase supply, and by increasing supply, control pricing. So bring that demand, the ratio of supply and demand into line as much as possible. This is quite refreshing in a way, in that and Luke would know better than me on this, whether this is right, but it's probably how the RMA originally was when it was first floated, and when we had to move to the RMA back in the 90s, I think it was, 91 or 91. Whenever it was. And this is probably how it all started out. And this is some government legislation just to help us to get back to bring some houses quickly to the market, which would normally take 5 to 7 years to rezone and bring to the market. So it's certainly helping our city out in a time of need when it comes to housing. So thank you, Deputy Mayor Martin.
Pick up Gary's earlier point, I obviously note that I have no interest or involvement in the Tawa Street proposal. However, I totally compliment Habitat for Humanity and the great work that they are doing. I do want to pick up, I think, on a point that Councillor Southgate, I think, raised in questioning, and that was the amenity issues. And obviously, in terms of the further evaluation process, is making sure that we get the right amenity issues around neighbourhood, traffic, green space and all that. I've seen the extreme other side of that in the city. We'll all have had these experiences. I remember in Bangkok once, I was just driving past, and there was right back next to this multi-container port with 10-storey high containers, you had this housing development slap bang, no delineation at all. So what I'm saying is that we want affordable housing. I think these proposals look quite exciting, but obviously, Luke, I still want good urban planning and outcomes, because this is people's lives, environment, etc. And I think I think a good job has been done, and I want to strongly commend the organisations that have brought these proposals, and picking up the Mayor's point around adequate supply. I do think, however, that if we look at some housing developments that historically have happened in the past, and they're still there, we can still see them, they have not exactly met in my view, good urban planning environmental outcomes in terms of their quality. And I don't think that because you have lower cost housing developments that necessarily equates to bad planning, bad outcomes. And there are some amazing, innovative housing developments that still come in within a good, reasonable budget. But I still want to commend the initiative of the groups behind these proposals.
Councillor Mark.
I agree with the Mayor wholeheartedly there about the urban design factor of it, and I will support it because I think we do need more houses, quite simply. I'm very cynical about whether this does enough to address affordability, but I'm banging that same drum. Yes, it increases supply, but I certainly don't believe, and I'm no economist, but I certainly don't believe it goes anywhere near the amount of supply that we need to really attack affordability, especially in the housing market at the moment, where we are victims to, or we are susceptible to the demands of the banks themselves, immigration growth, etc. All that stuff, so much more of that is beyond our control. So I think it's extremely naive and a little bit expedient to suggest that this amount of houses is going to affect affordability, with the exception of 42 potential dwellings from Habitat for Humanity, which I thoroughly applaud. But I would also I'm really keen to see this on to the next stage, because I agree we need more houses. It's as simple as that. It also addresses to a certain degree what I stood for, and that was building up rather than out as well. So I'm very pro infill and denser houses in there. I'd be really keen to see that they actually do happen in time as well, having learnt the lessons from how Auckland went with their SHAs. So I'll be really keen to watch that process. But yeah, go for it. But I just don't think we should get our hopes up that suddenly houses are going to drop in value as a result of this initiative, but it's a good step.
Councillor Paula.
I wholeheartedly agree with Councillor Bunting on this matter. I think these are very good opportunities. I was heartened to see that a number of the proposals attempt to address the need for diverse housing offerings, different sizes and different types, and that's vital for the city going forward, especially around affordability. But I'm going to watch closely to see what the detail of those is like in the long run. Sometimes I think you get largely the bigger houses and a few smaller ones to meet the criteria for a few smaller houses. We want to go beyond that. We're a city that has diverse views. We need city for the ageing. No, we need accommodation for the ageing population. Smaller homes where they can release some of their capital and get into a smaller, low-maintenance home, and then they can afford their rates as well. We need to do better. I agree with Martin. We need to do better than some of the existing high-density developments that the city currently has. We need to create communities, not just housing areas. But I do think this is exciting that people are putting their mind to about how quickly they can get houses up. And I totally agree with Councillor Bunting that I'm not confident that in the short term anyway, in the next 5 to 10 years, that we'll see this make any difference to housing affordability, because there are still a number of people who cannot afford to move from where they are presently. So you're not necessarily going to get a lot of turnover. And if we look at some other centres, the smaller houses have just been taken up by people who really, really need them at higher cost. So, you know, we still have the issue of social housing to address, not necessarily directly through the SHAs, but this council does need to consider how we engage in a conversation about other housing types for our people.
Councillor Jeff.
Thanks, Mayor Andrew. Look, I'm really pleased to see the response that we've had in regards to the SHAs. I understand that there's a process and they now need to be reviewed, but it's heartening to see that if you add them all up, you know, you're looking at more than 2,000 new units into the city. I'm a little bit more upbeat, I think, than Councillor Southgate and Bunting on it. I mean, I note that 2 out of the 7 SHAs do address low-income housing to some extent, which is a start, I guess. And there's a great range, you know, from the smaller places like Gilbass and Ave and Tawa Street up to the real biggie Tower Lakes, which I think personally is one of the most exciting plans to come before this council for a long time. I understand that it's a little premature to talk about it in detail. There's a process to go through. But, you know, with the water theme park there and hotels and accommodation, you know, I think it has the potential to be a real new gateway for the city from the north. And when you consider some of the public money over the years that we've ploughed into assets, you know, such as Waikato Stadium or Hamilton Gardens, and hopefully the River Plan as well will continue. Here we have another game changer for the city, and it's coming via private money. So to me, that's pretty exciting. But overall, yeah, support the staff recommendations and look forward to us doing these evaluations and the process continuing at a good pace. Thank you.
Councillor Mallett.
Thank you. Thank you, Luke. Here goes. Just on the affordability thing, all other things being equal, and that's important, all other things being equal, additional supply will reduce cost of housing than it would have been if we don't do it. So, yep, it won't, suddenly you're not going to have free houses, you're not going to suddenly have a dramatic drop in housing prices, but you certainly will reduce the cost of housing, all other things being equal, than if you don't do this. So, yeah, it's not going to be, it's not the answer, but it is better than us doing nothing. So that's my answer to that one. Secondly, I think this is exactly what we should be doing, letting the market determine where we build our houses and not us. So I'm very happy with that. Here it comes. But it does expose the big deficiencies in our only just operative district plan, because all of these things were prevented from being done by our district plan, which was our best guess, you know, 3, 6, 12, 10 months ago of what was going to go on. The only other issue I have with these, and I've expressed this before when I was asking the questions, I'm really very concerned that the implementation of any special housing accord or area respects the existing property rights of existing occupiers. I'm real keen that we are cognisant of that and be wary of this, because you can damage the existing property rights of existing occupiers through no fault of their own because of this reverse sensitivity issue. So we need, councillors, I think we just need to be very aware of that. Thank you.
Councillor James.
Thanks, Luke. Yeah, I think it's a little bit of a two-edged sword, really. I think the market will drive the prices of these houses, and you know, people who want to on-sell are not going to take a small price, are they? If they want to on-sell their house, they want to get as much as they possibly can for it. And that's what's going to happen. I think we have to be careful with high-density housing as well, because it does breed crime. It's been proven in places like LA and London, etc. You get places that start looking like the projects. So when people are living on each other's doorsteps, it does actually breed crime. Me, personally, I wouldn't like to live in a high-density area like that, because you do run that risk. But I suppose we do have to give it a go, give it a crack to see if it works out. But I am a little bit concerned about high-density housing. Thank you.
Councillor Siggy.
Thank you. Look, I'm just a bit confused about our rules that we had, that I thought we were only doing 3 positives and maybe 3 negatives, but that's okay. I can roll with it, no problem, because I do like to hear the discussions from everybody. And there's one thing I would like to add on, because I think everybody said everything. Maybe I got the rules wrong too, so sorry. But Councillor Bunting proposed a little while ago the 20% affordable housing to put on the developers, and I still think that might be the only way to get affordable housing. But hey, that's maybe at some other stage we can look at that again. Thank you.
Thank you. And as a right reply, I just want to thank you, Luke, for the work you've done around this. I know there's been a lot of work in your team and the other unit you've been working with. So thank you very much for bringing this together for us, and just for working the extra time. This is another project on top of all the other extra projects that this council staff are working on at the moment. And just on behalf of council, I want to thank you for bringing this through on time and well presented.
Thank you, that's very kind of you, but I do need to acknowledge the other people in my unit who have also been working long and hard on this, including Paul and Stefford, who's sitting behind me. So it's not certainly not just me who's doing these hours. There's a whole team behind me, but thank you very much.
Okay, we'll go to the vote. All those for? Any against? Carried. Okay, we now go to the Jefferson Place, which is item 11, page 83. So Luke's still here. We have touched on this. Is there anything else you want to add?
Look, through you, Mr. Chair. Look, as I said, just take the report as read. It was touched upon as part of the discussions for the previous report, but this application came fully formed. It has a high degree of information. It satisfies our policy. It's what I would consider a minor departure from something that's already been consented. It's in an area that's been identified within the policy itself. It serves an immediate and pressing need for housing at that location to improve the actual urban form of that area, which is now a vacant site. It's a great partnership project between Housing New Zealand and Waikato Tainui, and they're dedicated to apportioning what I consider a significant amount of that housing to the lower income recipients. And on that basis, my recommendation to proceed to recommend, subject to receiving just some final information as delegated to the Chief Executive, is one that I would hope you would endorse.
I'll move. Seconded by Councillor Jeff. Question from Councillor Mallett. Carries, sorry.
Sorry, thank you. Luke, it says on paragraph 80, public feedback is not considered necessary. So obviously you haven't asked the neighbours or anyone if there's a, so even though you didn't ask, did you get advice? Did anyone say, look, I don't want this happening? It's
my rationale for that is contained in that sentence in paragraph 80, on the basis that if this wasn't going through an SHA process, it would be coming through an RMA process, and the previous RMA process for this site consented it at 71 dwellings on a non-notified basis.
Say that again.
It consented it for 71 dwellings, and it was non-notified. So
it's not a significant change to.
From my opinion, the additional 9 dwellings is not significant, and the design, if you look at the design itself, which is contained, and it's just a snapshot, the full information has been circulated under separate cover, but attachment 2 to item 11, you can see there's a 3D rendering. The form of that is very similar to what was approved.
Okay, thank you.
On a non-notified basis, and I think this represents a way to get on with a good recommendation.
All right, thank you.
Okay, we move to debate. There's no debate. All those for? Sorry, Councillor Paulett.
I just wanted to say that I think that this development is very exciting. I've been aware of it in the original form, and I do like the way there is green space between everything and a sense of community. Certainly, it'll be interesting to see how this goes, because what was there before was pretty awful. So, that had to go in favour of something nicer to live in any case. People shouldn't have been living like that. I noticed that they haven't got a lot of, they've got small private yards, but they've got, the way I'm reading it, I think, is they've got quite a lot of mutual green space so it's a little bit like the Papakainga model that they used in 5 Crossroads, right, as well, isn't it? Yeah, so it does give a new way of living as a community, and I think we should be doing this is exactly the sort of mixed model with good sense of diversity, a good sense of urban design, I think, that we should hope the SHA would support.
Councillor Siggy.
Thank you so much. Well, after sitting in on the waste minimisation task force for a while, I'm just looking at the picture, and I'm just wondering whether we can get a rubbish truck turning around at the end there. That's all.
And we're in debate.
Yeah, so this is just a rhetoric question that Luke might just think about later.
Thank you. Okay, all those for? Any against? Carried. And we now move to item 12, page 97. Thank you very much, Luke, and your team. Well done. Thanks, Ricky. Thanks, girls.
Mayor Andrew, would you like me to give me a little bit of a rundown? Just a very quick one?
We'll take it as read, but if there's anything you'd like to add, that's for you.
No, nothing beyond the report.
Okay. Okay, moved by Councillor Paula, seconded by Councillor Leo. We have one speaker, Councillor Paula.
Oh, I don't really need to speak to it.
Okay.
I think, you know, look, I think it's the right thing to act in a regional unit for this particular purpose. No point in dividing everyone up. Everyone goes to their favourite beach, whether it's Raglan or whether it's somewhere in the Coromandel, Whitianga, whatever. And so we do need to protect our Hamilton citizens just like anyone else. And so this is a fair partnership.
All those for? Any against? Carried. We're now item 13, page 99. Sorry, 14. Page 100. Will you? Yes. So Leanne will present from the governance chair.
Thank you, elected members. I think you hopefully will recall the various emails that Brendan and I have sent out seeking input on this. This policy has been updated to reflect mandatory changes required by the new remuneration determination, and we also took the opportunity to review some aspects that were discretionary to council. So the recommendation there reflects, to the best of Brendan and my belief, the views of councillors that we did receive. Happy to take any questions.
Do we have a mover? Do we have a mover? Do we have a seconder? Okay, so moved by Councillor Jeff, seconded by Councillor Mark. Sorry, I missed a question. Yes. So Councillor Siggy.
Thank you so much for that. Just wondered whether the flu vaccine is not mandatory, isn't it?
No, it is not.
No. So I'm not really agreeing with that at all. That anybody, if they want.
Hang on. Excuse me. This is
questions.
So
Yeah. So
what was your question?
Okay.
No,
I asked it. Thank
sorry,
you.
What was your question?
Whether it was mandatory.
Which?
The flu vaccine, whether it was mandatory, but it's not. So that's all I wanted to know. Thank you.
So councillors are not going to be forced. They can do it by choice. They can actually exercise free will.
Yeah.
Free will.
So Councillor Southgate.
So thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question was around the training and conference. I see that it's going up from 5,000 to 6,000. I wasn't clear when I read, which is fine, because let's face it, any decent-sized conference takes up at least 2,000 of your money straight up. But what I was going to ask is that how does this increased amount fit with the fact that sometimes you're a delegate that's not within that? Right.
No.
So if I'm the delegate for a local government conference and council decides I get to go to...
The fund for councillor conference training by resolution stands separately from this.
Okay, thank you. That's just wanted to make sure because I wasn't sure where the words landed. Thank you.
Councillor Dove.
A little bit of explanation of the options there in the mileage claims, though mileage is an outdated word. Travel claims probably should be or something. Kilometrage.
Okay.
Which paragraph are you on, Dave?
It's page 103, 25 onwards for a bit. Which one is actually being proposed? That's what I couldn't... Because the motion... I mean, I understand the options.
Oh, sorry. Just give me 2 seconds here, because it's in the policy.
Oh, so it's including the policy, but you haven't said in the report itself.
And I haven't said in it. You're exactly
sorry.
right.
Okay.
And I think it's option...
Well, look, maybe I can supersede that. I find that out and tell us. But I think whichever we use, unless it's the status, exactly the status quo, which I don't think it is, then can you, following this meeting, just prepare a sample step of how people do that? Because if there's a change to what we've done, which is nothing unless you're travelling outside Hamilton in the past.
Yes.
Just show us how it works. Not now, but you know, from just as an email or something to us, or walk us through our first claim or something.
Well, Brendan's just arrived. Thank you, Brendan. Can I catch your breath for 2 seconds? Councillor McPherson's question was, and I'm a bit tongue-tied at the moment, which of the 3 options in terms of mileage, kilometrage claims, is the one that we're actually recommending? So
I think, to go back, I suppose the 3 options were canvassed in the email version that was circulated. Just looking back.
I just want to know which one's in the policy, because this track change stuff
Page 103.
It almost impossible to follow.
it's hard with the track changes, eh?
Yeah. So you've got 3 explained there, so which one have you put in the policy?
The one that is in the...
Just take your time, Brendan. Gather yourself. You just run down the stairs.
It's funny how you read these things.
You know
over
we're
and
quick
over and then-
movers at this council, Brendan. You have to
So the version that's gone into the agenda doesn't set out all the 3 options that were put around in the earlier support policy that was circulated to elected members. So what you'll see in the version that's in the agenda is the version that was circulated to elected members by email a couple of weeks ago, I think. So it doesn't set out all the 3 different options in that document.
I've got it. No, sorry, Dave, I've got it now. Sorry, I was reading the options instead of reading the report. So if you look at point 25 on page 103, and then under that point 26, that is what has been incorporated into the policy.
I read that as the starting position being what we've got now, not what we're changing to.
Yeah, sorry, so the draft...
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah. So, sorry, it could have been clearer.
Councillor Leo, we can come back to you, Dave, if you...
Could we have, following this, I think that'll make it clear to everyone how it works. It's the main thing.
Point taken. Thank you.
Councillor Leo.
You probably don't have the answer for this, but why can you get 73 cents a K if you've got a combustion engine, and you get 81 cents a K if you've got an electric vehicle?
I was going to ask the same question.
I believe my colleague looks
I
like
think
he
I
can
know
answer
the
that
answer,
question.
because they're trying to promote electric vehicles, isn't it?
I assume so. That one is just set down by the remuneration authority, so that's what we have to go with.
Because it'd be a lot cheaper to run an electric vehicle than it is for a combustion engine.
Where's that?
Was it?
Yeah.
Page 102F.
It does cost 3 times as much to buy a battery vehicle in the first place.
Yeah, I know.
So it costs you the same in the end. Sorry? Oh, I don't. Yeah.
Yeah, if the combustion engine is full, you won't be using much mileage at all because it won't go.
An Audi.
Yeah, the probably missing from that is that they did a special determination for one councillor of this council before that anyone with a 2-wheel vehicle would get 50% of whatever the rate is. So I'm presuming a 2-wheel electric vehicle would get half. What about this 2-wheel? I won't be claiming that. If he has to go to Tara, I'll be claiming it.
Okay, so we'll go to the vote. All those for? Any against? Carried. Okay, item 15, Sorry? Okay, we'll back out of that and we'll go to debates. Sorry, apologies, Councillor Siggy.
Thank you so much. I just want to say quickly something about that I still don't agree with. Having flu vaccination for free for us elected members. I think, you know, I would love to have that $22 to go for coffee. If the others want to choose the vaccination, I'll have the money. No, actually I don't. I just think we can pay for it ourselves. That's just mine. I just want to say that. So good.
Councillor Deputy Mayor Martin.
I won't be commenting on the flu vaccination, but I acknowledge that elected members can exercise individual choice on that. That is good, but I certainly support it being available. I just want to say that we're in a situation where my understanding is that all elected members at this point are able to engage in self-drive of their vehicles. I just want to be very mindful, should we ever be in a situation for legitimate reasons of health, disability, whatever, people are not in a position to do a self-drive. At that point, I would be intending to revisit that aspect in terms of what is the most appropriate way to enable elected members to come to a council meeting or do public functions. At the moment, we're making an assumption. We're making an assumption that for reasons of our ability, we can drive a vehicle. If that changes, obviously I'd want to revisit that. But at this point, I support the policy. No. Believe you me, it's really interesting when people have to lose a licence for legitimate reasons, but they're going to make a huge contribution. I don't want those people to be excluded for obvious reasons.
Councillor Leo.
Well, one issue with that, of course, is I can understand that for medical benefit or something like that. But if a councillor happens to be disqualified through the courts, I would be totally opposed to a return from a council meeting, that's for sure.
Okay, we'll go to the vote. All those for? Any against? Carried. Okay, we go to item 15, page 115. Do we have a mover? A move by Councillor James, Councillor Gary. All those for? Any against? Carried. Okay, we go to item C1. All those. Do we have a mover? Councillor James, seconded. Councillor Jeff, any debate? All those for? Any against? Carried. Thank you very much, everybody. Well done.
Good cheering, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.